America loves democracy. At least that's what it tells itself. It's the land of the free, the home of the brave, a shining beacon on a hill. America sees itself as a champion of democracy, spreading freedom and liberty around the world. But the reality is a bit more complicated. Turns out, exporting democracy isn't as simple as shipping iPhones or McDonald's franchises. It's messy, expensive, and often leaves a trail of unintended consequences. America's track record on promoting democracy is spotty at best. From military interventions to covert operations, the US has tried it all. Sometimes it works, often it doesn't, and sometimes it backfires spectacularly, leaving chaos and instability in its wake. So is America really a force for democracy in the world, or is it just a well-meaning but clumsy giant stumbling around and breaking things? Let's dive in and find out. America's foreign policy toolkit is full of interesting gadgets. There's diplomacy, of course, sanctions, always a classic. But then there's the big one, military intervention. The logic is simple: topple a dictator, prop up a democracy. Easy, right? Well, not quite. Turns out, invading a country and forcing regime change tends to make people a tad cranky. It's not exactly the best way to win hearts and minds. Plus, there's that whole pesky thing about, starting wars. Wars are expensive, bloody, and rarely go according to plan. And even if you do manage to overthrow a dictator, what then? Building a functioning democracy from scratch is like trying to assemble IKEA furniture after you've already chugged a six-pack. Difficult, frustrating, and likely to end in tears. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, shall we? War is expensive. Like really expensive. We're talking trillions of dollars spent, millions of lives upended. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan alone have cost the US trillions, with estimates soaring as high as $8 trillion when you factor in long-term healthcare costs for veterans and interest on debt. That's trillions that could have been spent on education, healthcare, infrastructure, things that actually benefit Americans. Instead, that money went towards bombing foreign countries and then rebuilding them, often poorly. And let's not forget the human cost. Hundreds of thousands of civilians have died in these conflicts, and millions more have been displaced from their homes. These are real people with real lives, not just statistics on a spreadsheet. Iraq, a textbook example of what not to do. Iraq, where to even begin? Remember those WMDs Saddam Hussein was supposedly hiding? Spoiler alert, they didn't exist. The 2003 invasion, based on faulty intelligence and fueled by questionable motives, was a disaster of epic proportions. The war plunged Iraq into chaos, creating a power vacuum that allowed groups like ISIS to flourish. It destabilized the entire region, fueled sectarian violence, and created a refugee crisis. And for what? To build a democracy that looks suspiciously like, well, not a democracy at all. Afghanistan. 20 years and trillions of dollars later. Remember the good old days of 2001 when we thought we could defeat the Taliban in a matter of months? Fast forward 20 years and trillions of dollars later, and the Taliban is back in charge. Turns out, nation building in a country with a history as complicated as Afghanistan's is complicated. The US withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021 was chaotic and messy, to put it mildly. It left the Afghan people, especially women and girls, in a precarious position. So much for spreading freedom and democracy,